Okay, guys, this first session for this week, I'm just not going to introduce anything new. I will in the second session, but I just want us to practice what we've talked about so far. So on the screen here now, you can see there are 6 practice problems for multiplying and dividing. And if you'll look here in this area right here, I've sort of gave you a little cheat code right in here, highlighting it in yellow, about if your signs are both positive, your answer is positive. If your sign's both negative, your answer is positive. If it's negative, positive, it's negative. Positive, negative, it's negative. So what I want you to do is I want you to practice these right now. Get a piece of paper out. Do these 6 problems. After you have these 6 problems written down, hit pause. Work them out. And then come back and I will have the answers for you. Okay, so hopefully you paused and now you're finished and you're hitting playback, and I'm going to give you your answers. Now we're going to talk about cross counseling again. That's going to make your life easier if you'll just practice this summer. So as you can see, if I look across this way, 3 and 3 can both be reduced by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. If I look across this way, 2 and 4, they're both divisible by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So now I would say 1 times 1 at the top and 1 times 2 at the bottom. And then I have to decide if it's a negative or positive 1/2. So it's a negative multiplied by a positive. So it is a negative 1/2. Okay, here's division. So it's actually going to be negative 7/5 times, keep, change, flip, and I'm going to multiply it by a negative 3/2. Well, I look across at 5 and 3. I cannot cross reduce. They're both prime. I look across here at 2 and 7. They're both prime. So you can't always cross reduce, but you always check. So 7 times 3 is 21, and 5 times 2 is 10. That is a negative times a negative, so that makes that a positive 21/10. And we've talked about, as you go into upper level mathematics, that it's okay to leave your answer improper as long as it is reduced, and this is reduced. Okay, here we're going to keep the 9/4, change the division to multiplication, and flip the negative 1/2 to a negative 2/1. I look across this way, and yes, I can cross reduce. 4 and 2 are divisible by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. Of course, when I look across this way, 1 and 9, 1 is as low as you can go, so you cannot cross reduce. So my answer is going to be 9/2. It is a positive multiplied by a negative, so it is a negative 9/2. And again, it is improper, but that's okay as long as it is reduced, and it is. Here I look across, and 8 and 4 are both divisible by 4. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, and 4 divided by 4 is 1. I look across this way, 7 and 5 are both prime, so they cannot be cross-reduced. So my answer is 7/10, and it is a positive multiplied by a positive. So my answer is positive. Okay, here we're going to keep the negative 4/3, change the division to multiplication, and flip 1/4 to 4/1. I look across here. I cannot cross reduce. They're neighbors. I look here, I cannot cross reduce because 1 is done. So that is 16 over 3, and that is a negative multiplied by a positive. So this is a negative 16 thirds, and that is my answer. I look across this way on number 6, and 3 is divisible by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. I look across this way, and I have a 1, so 1 is done. Cannot do anything that way. So my answer is going to be 1/8, and it's going to be a positive 1/8 because negative times negative makes a positive. If you have any questions over any of these, you know you can reach out and ask me anything at any time. Okay, now we're going to practice what we talked about last week. And I've made you, again, a little cheat. If the signs are alike, you add and you keep the same sign. Like number 2. Let's use number 2 as an example. Number 2, I have a negative 21 adding to a negative 15. They're both negatives. So the signs are alike. So I add, get 36. And since they're both negatives, my answer is negative. And then on the other spectrum, if the signs are different, you subtract and you take the sign of the larger number, or the sign actually of the larger absolute value. So for instance, number 1, I have a negative 63 added to a positive 19. So my signs are different. So I would subtract. And when I subtract, I get 44. And that would be a negative 44 because I look at just the what we call base, and that's 63 and 19. 63 is larger than 19. 63 is negative, so my answer is negative. So what I want you to do is I want you to practice these problems, write them down, practice them, and then put me on pause, which has got to be your favorite thing to do. And when you get done, you come back and check your answers. Now, you're going to notice that some of these problems you'll say, Miss Pendleton, you got the same problems down twice. Change signs on you, so be careful. I did that on purpose. Okay, so number 3, the signs are different. 31's positive, 40's negative, so I will subtract. And when I subtract, my answer is 9. And then is it going to be a positive or a negative 9? 31 and 40. 40's greater base, so it's a negative, so my answer is negative 9. Number 4, 18's positive, 24's positive, so signs are alike, so I add. And that gives me 42. They're both positive, so my answer is a positive 42. Number 5, my signs are alike, so I add and keep the same sign, negative 28. Number 6, my signs are different, so I subtract, and 14 is the greater base. It's negative, so that would be a negative 8. Now, look at number 7. You think it's the same problem, but it's not. This time the 14 is positive, and this time the 6 is negative. The signs are still different, so I still subtract. But in this problem, it's going to be a positive 8 because the 14 is still your greater base, but this time it's positive. If you look at number 8, it is the same as number 1, except I changed the signs again. So the signs are still different, so I'm still going to subtract. But again, this time it's going to be positive because that base 63 is still the greater absolute value. So since it's positive, my answer is positive. And then number 9 and number 3 are similar. But again, I'm going to subtract because my signs are different. But again, this time it's going to be positive because positive 40 would have a greater absolute value than negative 31. And there's one more thing I want us to practice. It's multiplying 3 numbers, factors. So didn't have these pre-done, excuse me. The order of operations there on number 2. Okay, do these 3. Remember your rules. Back up here for multiplication and division. Highlighted there in yellow. Once you get these finished or finish writing them down, hit pause. Okay, when you have more than, these are all 3 multiplying on number 1, so I'm going to go from left to right. So I'm going to focus on these 2 first. I look across, I cannot cross reduce, they're neighbors. Look across, I cannot cross reduce because there's 1 is done. So I'm going to get 3 8s and a negative times a negative makes that a positive 3 8s. Then I'm going to multiply that by negative 2/3. I brought that down. I can cross reduce the 8 and 2 by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4 and 2 divided by 2 is 1. I can cross reduce the 3's by 3. They each become 1's. And that's going to give me 1/4. And this was a positive times a negative. So this is a negative 1/4. Number 2 and 3, order of operations. When you've got both multiplication and division, you go from left to right. Another way you might have seen this same problem written would have been like that. So I'm going to multiply first here. 6 times 8 is 48. A negative times a positive is a negative 48. Divided by a negative 2. 48 divided by 2 is 24. Negative divided by negative makes that a positive 24. Again, on number 3, order of operations. If you have both multiplication and division, you go from left to right. Look at this first. So 45 divided by 5 is 9. Positive divided by negative is negative 9. Multiply that by 6, which is 54. A negative multiplied by a positive makes that a negative 54. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I will have another session put on probably tomorrow.